Welcome to the Wyrd Way, a podcast about magic, folklore, healing, and everything in between. I'm your host, Sharon Ruderman, and your guide if you choose to follow the Wyrd Way. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wyrd Way. I am Sharon, your host, a seer, a video witch, tarot reader, teacher, and I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're here with us. I'm glad that you're here to learn a little bit about Hekate. This is a storytelling episode, a deep dive. Although I would say that we're going less of a deep dive and more of a scratching the surface because Hekate is vast. She is gigantic, and there's no way that in 45 minutes I could cover or even scratch the surface of her history. And so I kind of explain that in the episode. And I also, what I really do is share my personal story of working with Hekate, of getting to know her, of how we met, and what that sort of looks like for a lot of folks, a lot of witches, and I share one of her more famous mythology tales from ancient Greece. So I think this is a really good episode. Don't think I have many announcements except that the breath work I was gonna do this weekend on Saturday, I'm pushing to the following weekend, the beginning of December. So if you follow me on Instagram, you will know about that soon. And so I hope that you all will come if you have never done breath work before. I'm a really gentle teacher, and I think it's a really powerful kind of work to be doing, especially around the holidays. If you need some extra support, the darker days of the year, it's really nice to gather, even if it is virtually. So yeah, and if you've never done breathwork before, please join us. It's no experience necessary. And even if you have done it before, come join us because it is always different every time you do it. So anyway, I think that's it. If as far as video magic goes, if you are looking to bring video into your small business, your brand, you're looking for someone to edit your videos, so get at me. I am starting to book for the beginning of the year. So if that's something you're interested in, you can find me at video-magic, magic with a K.com, video-magic. And you can find me on Instagram as well. But yeah, I know that you're not here to hear me promoting my various interests and passions. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So this is the story of Hekate, a little bit of my personal story with her, a little bit of background story, and a retelling of probably her more well-known mythology stories. She is known by many names and many aspects. She is powerful, revered, and often feared. She is the queen of the witches, the dark mother, the triple-crowned goddess, the torch-bearer, the keeper of the keys, the moon goddess, goddess of the dead, goddess of the crossroads, mother of all things, and the great mother witch from which all other witches descend from. Hekate, most likely known to you from ancient Greece, is actually much, much, much older. Evidence of Hekate worship has been found in Sicily, Libya, Turkey, Bulgaria, Syria, And one of the earliest records of Hekate in Thrace is from Aberdera, a 6th century colony of what is now Turkey. She is known today and has always been known as the goddess of witches and witchcraft. And even back in ancient times, sorcerers and witches and women who worked with ritual and spells and healing, they worshipped Hekate. Her story is somewhat confusing because it's so old and there's just so much, and I'm not a historian. I'm going to share some facts with you, and I'm going to give you some books to read, because what I really would like to focus on is how did she become this modern day mother of witchcraft. I'm also going to share my personal story with Hekate. But before we get into that, I am going to read probably the more well-known story, which is the story of the triple-crowned goddess with Persephone and Demeter and Hekate. I am borrowing this retelling from goddessmecca.com. I will leave a link in the show notes for you. This is a much simplified version of the original story. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, was respected as an earlier version of Mother Earth. As a nurturing mother, she generously tended to the earth in order that we mortals could enjoy the benefits of her rich harvest all year round. Demeter's daughter Persephone enjoyed helping her mother and often accompanied her as she worked in managing the soil, crops, and nature itself. As Persephone matured, she grew into a beautiful young woman, catching the eye of would-be suitors. One day, while helping her mother, she wandered off into a meadow to pick some wild flowers. Distracted by the colors and beauty of the flowers, she did not notice the ground abruptly opening behind her. Hades, god of the underworld, had been watching for an opportunity to seize her for his bride. Out of a hole in the earth, he sprang from his chariot to snatch her, slinging her over his shoulder and dragging her down into the underworld, land of the dead. After they disappeared, the hole covered over, leaving no trace for anyone to see where Hades had emerged from. Distraught when she could not find her daughter, Demeter wandered through the earth, trying to find out what had happened to her child. Since Zeus, king of the gods, was the father of Persephone, she implored him to assist her, but he would not interfere since he did not want to meddle in the affairs of Hades, who was his brother. Demeter met the crone Hekate, goddess of the dark side of the moon and patroness of the witches. Hekate told her that she had heard Persephone calling one day, and that Helios, the sun god, confirmed he had seen Persephone's abduction by Hades. Demeter went off to complain to Zeus, who refused to intervene, so Demeter withdrew from her role as goddess. Without her, no crops could grow, and the resulting famine threatened the extinction of the human race. Eventually, Zeus declared that Hades would have to let Persephone go. Hades argued that if she had eaten anything while in the underworld, she would not be able to return to Earth. Since Persephone had eaten 6 pomegranate seeds, it was agreed that she would have to spend 6 months of every year in the underworld as the bride of Hades. But she could return to Earth for the remaining half of the year. While Persephone is in the underworld, her mother mourns and refuses to allow crops to grow until she welcomes her daughter back again. Such is the explanation for the lack of growth we encounter in the earth during autumn and winter. In contrast, spring and summer see a time of renewal with Persephone when she returns with her mother. So there you have it. That is a simplified story of the 3 goddesses. And they all 3 represent an aspect of the triple crown, the maiden mother crown. Persephone as the maiden, Demeter as the mother, and Hekate as the crone, the wise woman. So from the book Hekate, Goddess of Witches, I feel like this little section here is a pretty good summary of who Hekate is. She is known as the goddess of death, one who guards souls in the underworld, whose symbols include the black dog, the whip, and the dagger. She is known as the keeper of the crossroads, a goddess who helps those experiencing transition. She is called the key holder or the torchbearer, the one who opens doors and reveals secrets, a goddess of the cosmos who holds mysteries beyond our modern understanding. She is associated with the depths of the sea, the stars of the night, and the fertile earth. She is a patroness of parents. She also has been called the three-headed, the one who arms the hand with murky, dreadful lamps, goddess of the crossroads, the voice of dogs, and the far darter. She has been associated with the underworld and mystical rites involving bloody sacrifices, justice, and creatures of revenge. She is often described in the myths as being older than the other gods, and sometimes as coming from an unspecified, faraway place. Then, as now, Hekate was a goddess of magic and a patroness to sorcerers and witches. The magic she wrought took many forms: the power to heal or to kill, to punish and to find justice, to protect the traveler and the home, or to curse another. She was frequently associated with the mysterious and frightening elements of life, such as ghosts, nightmares, and the unknowable afterlife. But as she drew fear, Hekate also attracted fervent devotion from her followers. So, I personally see her as a personal goddess. I think most modern day witches might agree, especially if you're a solo working witch. You believe that you develop a relationship with her, just as you develop a relationship with a friend or a partner or anybody. It starts very similarly, usually because she is known as the goddess of the crossroads, as the guide. She often comes in at first beating during an underworld journey, during a dark night of the soul, during probably when you're feeling just so lost that you have no idea what is next. That is when Hekate comes to find us. And then you sort of go on your own deep dive. You once you make that first contact, I think most people, unless you're too frightened or fearful or don't want that kind of devotional connection, I think most people take a deep dive. They get all the books, they go onto the blogs. There's so much information out there that it's actually a bit overwhelming, I would say. I think that there's a lot of people who work with Hekate, especially as witchcraft has become more out in the open, I think. And so, she's in a lot of even modern day TV shows and such. I mean, I think I just saw her. She was in The Sandman season 1. She was also in one of the more recent seasons of Sabrina, the Teenage Witch on Netflix. I actually think they did a pretty good job in that as to sort of show how people work with her today, as opposed to in The Sandman, she was more like the fates. So, yeah, I think some of her animals, her symbols, I think those are great things to learn when you're working with her, especially when you're learning ways to communicate with her. Her colors, her garden, her stories, some of the old ways that people work with her. A lot of times she is people keep altars to her in homes because she looks over homes. A lot of people offer her food and offerings around the new moon because that is Hecate's time during the dark moon. Right now, we're in the month of November. That is her month. That is in what I see as like the high holy days for working with Hekate. I personally, because I was brought up Lutheran, and I think there's just something in me that is sort of anti being told that I have to do things on a certain day for certain religious reasons. I sort of tend to do things when I feel like doing things. And some people might tell me that that's wrong, but that's the way that I work. Like, I don't necessarily, for a little while there in my life, I always felt like I needed to do a new moon ritual. And I think like as we have, and then there was a certain point where I just, decided that wasn't really my thing. I didn't feel the need to set these intentions every month, and I would instead do them when it felt like it or when it felt like important. I do think there's a lot of good to using the phases of the moon. I'm not saying that there isn't. I think that it's very smart to work with the astrology and the moon when you're doing ritual, or especially when you're trying to release or call something in. But when it comes to devotional practices, I think like any relationship, it reflects how you are in other relationships. So I'm the type of friend that you probably have to call and keep in touch with because I'm not going to call you. But because I wanted to, when I first had contact with her, I wanted to nurture that relationship. It felt really important. So for like probably a year or so, I really heavily devoted myself to making a space in my home at that time. She always will have a space in my home wherever I live, although it just might not be as active all the time. I feel now that she is someone that I call on for the bigger things, the crises, or she is a busy goddess, so she's just not somebody that you call on for like lost keys, like you don't just call on her because for the small stuff. I think that there are just things that you learn along the way as you get to know her, and I learned that through calling on her too much, and so the way that I first started working with Hekate it's pretty classic of a story. For most people, their stories are very similar. They start out the same way. I was going through a really, really hard time. I would say that it was like fall of 2019. No, sorry, let me restate that. It was fall of 2021. I had been out of an abusive relationship for about a little less than a year, probably like 9 months or so. I was going through some growing pains of trusting myself. I had lost all faith in myself. I had lost faith in my intuition. I had felt like I was lost, although I don't really believe that you're ever truly lost, but I had felt like I had really messed up and gotten turned around on my path and I was really down. And I felt like I was definitely in one of those like dark night of the souls. And I was just sort of starting to come out of it that autumn by doing the practices that I knew were helpful by really diving deeply into more ritual work and meditation and my tarot deck and journaling, and I was doing a lot of breath work and all that stuff. Because it felt urgent. I was older, at that point. I had, we were in the middle of a pandemic. I was getting sued. It was just a really hard time of my life. And I was wanting to move to Santa Fe. I wanted to leave New York. And so I was like, well, I think I needed to get a little bit more real about a lot of, I had kept getting like readings that were saying that I was meant to be doing ritual and I was meant to be working with like old ways and old magic and all this stuff. And I was like, but how? And all that, all that jazz. And so anyway, so I did I did that autumn equinox. I did a ritual and I literally had just like Googled it. But it was pretty classic. I'd seen similar ones around. And so it's, it involves like apples and candles and offerings and wine. And I just kind of followed it verbatim. And it felt really interesting. It felt really powerful. And at the end, you sort of go into goddess pose and listen. Just the instructions were to listen. And I was like in shock because it was just like I had a direct line to the goddess. It was crazy. I was sort of like really freaked out because I had never heard another voice like that so clearly. That wasn't my own. That wasn't my intuition. That was clearly, something outside of myself. She had a different tone. She had a different voice. She had a different way of speaking. And it was like stuff I would never say. So it was like I knew I wasn't making it up. And so once that happened, I got like a couple books and was, read that like my experience was similar. It was very similar to other people. Since then, I've been in classes with teachers that have spoken about their personal stories with Hekate, and it's very similar, like going through a dark time, going through a crossroads, going through a period of just shadow work. And that is usually when she comes to you. And so that's why, yeah, I would say that she is someone who has there's a lot of fear around working with Hekate. And I think it's because she rules these darker aspects of human life. She rules the underworld. She rules dreams and prophecy and ghosts. But she's also the mother of witches. So I feel like as I got to know her and my faith built working with her, I learned that I could call on her when I really needed. And she also really guided me, I think, to do this move. It was a really scary thing to like pack up your whole life and leave. I lived in New York State my whole life. I was born in New York and I lived in the city for the last in Brooklyn for the last my whole adult life, basically. And it was time to leave. It was time to go. And she guided me out of there. And I really think that she gave me the strength and the I won't say that like over the last 2 years I've been getting to know myself and relearning to trust myself and my intuition. But it really started with with my relationship with Hekate, with meeting her. And she gave me the word witch. I think that before that I really felt kind of, I mean, I still feel strange about it. We all have, or a lot of us have, the witch wound, right? That brings up that fear when we go to do ritual, that brings up that fear when we use the word witch, that brings up fear around talking about these practices, and can make us, feel like we should keep it in the shadows. And I think working with Hecate actually taught me to not keep it in the shadows. I started talking about her more on my Instagram. I started channeling her and offering messages for the people, for the peoples. And it was really cool. It was a very interesting time period. I don't do that as much because I don't feel her calling me as much. I don't feel her needing to guide me as much. I'm working with different things at the moment, but I know that she's there, and I know that I can call on her when I really need to. And like I said, she'll always have a place in my home. I sometimes do think that she does come calling, and it's just like certain times of the year feel like it's time to work with her, or at least strike up a conversation. I mean, I called on her before I recorded this to make sure I had permission. And I still have a lot of those messages. I wrote them all down at the time, and they were really, really powerful stuff. So I encourage I encourage anybody who is curious about working with her. She's very the thing is, like, yeah, she's very feared, but she's very, like, for everybody. She's, because I think she belongs to so much of history. I don't really think that she is for any one culture, right? Like, I think that she is for the masses in a way. This, like, all mother. It's said that her great grandmother is Gaia, who is Mother Earth, right? So that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. That's the kind of, like, power we're talking about. Sometimes it's said she's called, like, the virgin or the maiden goddess because she never took like a husband. But she had many children, and she has many descendants. And as history goes on, of course, she has other correspondence and names and stories that came with that. And so I think this is what I learned when I was at the Bhakti Center in New York City, when I was doing yoga teacher training and learning about Bhakti yoga, which I am always forever grateful for, because I really feel like those guys have devotion down, right? Like, and so they taught me a lot about working with deities and doing devotional work. And the thing is there's prescribed methods that you can follow. But I also think that, say, for example, that you're a recovering alcoholic and you no longer keep wine or alcohol in your house. And wine is one of, like, the top things that they say to offer the goddess. She will accept other things. She will accept even the, a juice or water or, something that you keep in the home, because you don't have to put your sobriety in danger to work with her. But, like, that's an example just of how you can make it personal, right? Like, I also think that some foods that are associated with her, because she, she's thought of as this ancient Greek goddess. And so a lot of times people will offer her, like, Mediterranean foods. And so I think you just have to, do what feels right, like bread and cheese. You can never really go wrong with, like, fruit. But also, I have learned from working with her, she taught me that I can offer her my anger. I could offer her my pain. my frustrations. And that was really helpful because there was a long time period during that time period where I just couldn't, I felt like I was healing from a lot of it and I just couldn't release the anger. And so she told me to give it to her, and it was really beautiful, like, and kind of funny because when I did offer it to her, I would get these visions of her like collie style, like gobbling it up with like this giant tongue, and it was just, yeah, it was really cool. So yeah, so I feel like as usual I'm always like talking in different directions. I don't I make notes, but then I just kind of like go with it. And so sometimes my stories get a little off off the main road. But the point is that there's a lot of info out there about how to work with the goddess and how to get in touch with her. But the truth is I think that she calls you, that she comes to you, that you know, there's a reason why I was doing that ritual that night, because that year oh, it was really funny. I had a astrology reading from a friend that year, and I was telling him all about how I had met the goddess, and he was like, well, it was weird because actually in my chart that year I had the constellation Hekate in my chart, and he was showing me how it was like a direct line to the goddess, like I had a bat phone to call her. And so that's why I do think that that year was really important. And that connection really, really helped me at that time. She's really big energy. I think, you know, if you're going to call on her, then you shouldn't take that lightly. You should have the respect. And that's what I was kind of getting at before when I said the Bhakti Center taught us how to do this devotional work. And I think that it's really just bringing although it can be personal, I think it's always important to have respect when you're working with deities, and especially one as large as Hekate. It was cool. She just came back into my life recently because I was in a shadow work kind of workshop class. Sacred Familiar is what it's called. And it's doll making, and it's really cool, especially if you have it in your blood like I do. I grew up making dolls, and so this was definitely like, it just felt really good to be doing this kind of crafting with my hands right now. And in the most recent class I took, it was a shadow work course, and one of the lessons was around working with Hekate. And she was actually just so large that the teacher was shown from the goddess to make these smaller dolls for us that were more like little witches' guides. And I think that I will eventually make a Hekate doll. I just I know it's going to be big, and so I'm just not quite ready to start that project yet. I think that it is important to have that like fear, but it's like, don't be scared of making contact. It's more like having the respect and reverence. But for those of you who are looking for some info of like how to get started, I would say just try your best. You know, light your candle, make an offering, do what your intuition tells you to do first. I have more likely started a lot of books around working with Hekate, and I have learned, you know, cool stuff about her history and different things. Ultimately, she tells me sometimes that I don't need those books, you know, that just asking her turns out to be better than what because I think those people wrote what Hecate told them. Right now, I have picked up a couple from the library, and mostly it was for this podcast episode, just so I could like brush up a little bit on the history. And I so far really like Hecate, Goddess of Witches by Courtney Weaver. That seems like a good one. Maybe it's because she's a fellow New Yorker. There's a lot out there. There's a lot on the internet too. And you are called. Maybe this has happened already. That's why you're listening to this podcast. Maybe you're looking for some insights. But I did want to give some common symbols. If you are going to create like an altar for her, it's pretty common to have either a statue or an image of the goddess. I actually just painted. I made like a painting of her symbols. And then just more recently, I have added some dolls that I felted that represent the maiden, mother, and crone. Like I said, I used to offer her wine, and here in the desert, it became an issue because of bugs. And so I just have like a bottle of wine unopened on her altar. I have an owl. It's one of her animals. The dog is a big one for Hecate. Of course, fire, because she's the torchbearer. I have a dagger on her altar. And I often, give her, offer her flowers. But yeah, I think it's pretty easy to look up her different things. Her colors are, I think, purple and black and gold and red. It really depends on like what aspect you're working with of the goddess, because she's so vast. So it depends on like what spell or ritual you're doing, what colors you would probably use. I think probably having, working with her on the new moon, because that is known to be her day, would be a really good way to get started. I think just first off, creating a place for her in your home, or it could be outside, because she doesn't mind being out there. We're working with her at a crossroads, leaving an offering there. Of course, one that is safe to leave outside, that's safe for local animals, to petition, some kind of change in your life. That would probably be a good one to do. There are words that you could learn. I think that she really likes it when you make up your own, as long as they're respectful and they make sense. This is where I feel like the books do come in handy, because you can learn some of like the classic ways to call on her and then make it something that for your, like, make it your own. These are good ways to get started. And especially, we're coming to a close in the end of November of her month per se, but she's also the goddess of winter. Like, it's a time period of going sort of hermity and inside. But yeah, I hope that this was helpful. I know that it's just really scratching the surface, but that's all I really meant to do in this episode, was to scratch the surface, because there's just probably could have like a whole podcast devoted to Hecate, and there might be some out there actually. Actually, there probably are. I hope that anybody who was a little bit curious or already works with Hecate, there's so much I didn't mention that I'll probably think of later, that I was like, I probably should have said more about the keys. Maybe I will. I'll tell you a little bit about her as the keeper of the keys. I have felt that at certain times in my life, I have been handed keys. I have found keys. I have been asked for a key. I feel like it's very symbolic. On a lot of tarot decks, the Hierophant has keys on the card. And I think that sometimes to me is like a Hecate card, because she hands you, when the time is right, she hands you the keys to open the door to the next level of your path or your witchcraft or your journey. And so that's why they call her the keeper of the keys, or one of the reasons why. And so that's often one of the things I would ask, like, hand me the key when the time is right. And I keep keys on her altar, of course. But yeah, I'm really grateful. I really think that my life changed for the good and made a very strong change in direction when I met her. I think that she helped me do some stuff that I had been talking about, and she just helped me take some action. And I think really importantly, she helped me own the word witch. That is currently part of my identity is being a witch. And I was very much afraid to say that for a very long time. And while I still have some fear around that, I find myself saying it more and more. And it feels just more ordinary all the time. So yeah, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, leave me a comment. If you want more info, or I don't know, want to talk about Hekate, reach out. I love talking about her. I am no way an expert, just a student and a devotee. But I wish you all the best of luck. I also wishing you all sunshine and vitamin D. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, we have started to enter the grayer parts of the year. So take care of yourselves. Do what you got to do to get through the winter holidays and the autumn holidays. And I will see you at the beginning of December for another monthly forecast. So until then, keep it weird. You have been listening to The Wyrd Way, recorded, edited, and produced by Sharon and Video Magic.